Our alphabet is actually a pictographic system. It was created by scribes thousands of years ago who were previously writing with hieroglyphics, iconic diagrams, um, a new one for each object or each word. Each spoken word had its own diagram, sort of like Chinese. Um, they wanted to simplify. So what they did is figured out how to make diagrams of the speaking mouth, talking cues. They broke down the language into repeated sounds or how those sounds were articulated, each letter, and derived the letters, broke the spoken utterances down to about 20 something letters. At first, mostly consonants, because those are easier to see, like buh, buh. The letter B is clearly a profile of the front lips. Is a tighter of the lips pressing together. Whereas W is more of the opening. Wah, wah, wah. Things like that. K, k is the back, either the K, k, the C, or even the G, G. G just has a hard front on it, the large G sound, because you have to articulate more, jut your jaw out. G has a little goatee on the front there. But most of the letters still today, you can see the talking cue in them, the prompt. Say the word cat, cat, which is a common word in our early primers where we learn to read. You can really see why that word was chosen, because it's very pictographic. Here I got it down there. See the C-A-T. K is the back of the mouth. A, here's, see that letter next to the cat? That's the old Phoenician A form, the old alphabet that our language derived from, or one of the alphabets we came from. It's basically a hinged mouth, because when you say or a, it's the opening and closing of the mouth, compared to the other vowels anyway, compared to say om. But with cat, first you start with the C, and then you have the opening of the A, and then the T. The T is the same as what we say for time out. You know, we put our fingers like that. It's the same, that gesture is repeating the same tongue gesture, verbal gesture that the tongue makes when it touches the upper palate in the same way. So ka, a, t. It's a really good word for teaching children how to see the pictography of the alphabet, and they get on that. And so the alphabet has visual talking cues embedded in it, just like hieroglyphics did. But by doing a hieroglyphic system of the speaking mouth, they were able basically to do a pictographic representation of language on the page. And they only had to learn that way. It was much simpler. They only had to learn a few, or a couple dozen or so letters, as opposed to an icon, thousands of icons. It also enabled them to do translations of various languages this way too. They could actually simulate phonetically the language on page, really roughly, but for scribes, for professional jobs, was to often to translate between different cultures. The phonetic system would have been a real advantage, a great technology. But it's not arbitrary. The letters evolved through many alphabets over time, in the same way that all language evolves. It evolves, there is a natural selection process, and it's basically our memory. Like the spoken words, the written words have to be something we can memorize, something that makes sense to us, and the more apt they are, the forms, the better in the long run. Over generations, what survives are the forms that make the most sense, easiest to recognize. So I want to run through the alphabet, basically. The alphabet, just by the way, alphabetical order came on pretty early, but I think the first signs of alphabetical order are roughly like about 3,000 years ago over there. But turned out to be very valuable, having this system of letters where there was an order to them. I wondered, A through Z. That was sort of an extra benefit of the alphabet, that order, because say you can, for a dictionary, for example, you can arrange words and look them up quite easily. The Chinese, who have a hieroglyphic system, they have a lot harder time looking up words. They don't have a clear order. It has to do with some visual structure of the word. So the phonetic order given to us by the alphabet turned out to be quite useful. But so I'm going to go roughly in alphabetical order through the letters, though I will start with the vowels because they're a bit distinct. The alphabet began with just consonants, and gradually the vowels were added in. I think because consonants tend to be more obvious, easier to diagram. They usually involve a clear stop somewhere in the mouth, like b, k, d, d. So a little easier to draw what the organs, the lips and the tongue and the back of the mouth are doing, where the stops are. The vowels are a little more in the center of the mouth and a little less dynamic, with no stop. So those kind of were added on later as they became useful. Took some confusion out of the writing. Before, you kind of had to just guess what the words were based on the consonants, but it was confusing. So they evolved the vowels. But A, like I said, the Phoenician A is sort of the hinged mouth, because A is generally a. I'm used to two, the long and the short vowel forms of the vowels. But A. A is typically the opening and closing. Amongst the vowels, it does that more than the others. O, om. It tends to make a hollow of the mouth, like an O, like whole, the word whole. H-O-L-E or W-H-O-L-E, either one. Whole or zero, the empty set, zero. It's the hollow of the mouth. E is more where you kind of it's more of a tightened mouth. And if you look at the letter, the E, there's sort of you can kind of see the E, you can kind of feel it a little bit between the clenched teeth, the voice coming out between. E, like emit, emit. Ooh, you is a similar. It's focused outward. Ooh, ooh. The word you, Y-O-W, like you, the other person. Ooh, kind of points outward. You can see why the Y is sometimes a vowel. E is kind of shaped like the U. You, ick, like I, the vowel I. Not sure of the pictography on that. I see why the first person pronoun is I, because that looks like a stick figure. It's an individual, I, simplest representation of a person. Very similar to the number one. One. I can be one, as in one person. Also the number one. They're both pictographically the same because it can represent either a finger or an individual. But I amongst the other, compared to the other vowels, it kind of hangs out in the back of the mouth. It's the least dynamic vowel. O is more so. O is more frontal. You can kind of see it more. But I, kind of more internal. Ich in German. Ich. So I don't really see the only pictography I might see on the letter I is the small I has the little dot on top. Kind of reminds me of that little dot hanging piece of flesh in the back of the mouth. Don't know if that's the case, but sometimes I think that. The little J has it too, but the little J used to be an I. It was just an old variation on the letter I. So that's the vowels. The consonants. B, b. You see the B, the labia, b, b. There, for the B is two lips together. W. W is the questioning letter. Wa, wa, ooh, wa, ooh, wa. Two U sounds in a row, the ooh and the ooh, ooh, ooh. That prompts the W sound. So the letter U, the letter W looks like two U's in a row. May have been how they wrote the W sound back in the day, and then it consolidated into one letter that we decided was a consonant because you can see the W on your face. It's a front letter, lip readable. Your lips move in a certain way. It leaves the mouth open, which is signaling a questioning expression on your face. What? So it's a great letter for our question words like why, what. That's called a viseme. A viseme is when we signal the meaning of the word on our face, because especially words that cause an emotional response on the face already, part of our facial expression, like ouch or wince. These question words are those. A look of wonderment or puzzlement or awe on our face. Awe is similar, slack-jawed wonder, awe. Well, something we don't understand often prompts a questioning look on your face. What is that? What? So W, interesting letter. The C is the back of the mouth, K, like with cave, or think of crocodile. Crocodile can be a C, or in German it's Krokodil with a K on there. Either way, crocodile. D, D is the Greek letter that used to be called delta, because it looks like a fan-shaped delta spread out below. Because when you say the letter D, you're, there you go. There's a picture of a delta from above, from the air above, a river delta. The Greeks called, that's why they call it a delta, but it also looks like a plan view of your upper palate. Because when you close your mouth, when you say the word door, duh, you spread your tongue over your upper palate. So there's a little pictography there. The G, and the K, the G, the hard G, G, K is very similar to the C in shape. But there's that little goatee up front sticking out, as I've mentioned. P, the word pop. You blow up the P. The P is that pouch of the mouth here, popping. Then there's N. Look at the letter N, you can see noses in it. It's a couple of noses, but it's a nasal letter. Sinus, nose, because it has a resonance to it. You basically you close up your with your tongue. You close up your mouth, and the voice resonates through your skull here. M is similar, but M you close up your whole mouth, and so the resonance is a little more down here, like hum. But is more nasal. But either way, like they both kind of keep the sound on the inside. Mnemonic. That's probably why mnemonic's a word, because it's a good memory. Remember. Kind of you feel the inside. The voice isn't all going out, it's contained. F is a letter that you can kind of see too. It's like with F, your upper lip sticks out more because your teeth comes down and closes in on F. When you say the word knife, you use that F to as a signal. The teeth cutting into that lip, the flesh of the lip. It's the knife sticking into the lip. It's a good signal for the word. But when you do it, you're pulling back the lower lip and the top lip sticking out a little bit more. A little bit like the signal of the F. It's a little bit of a top heavy kind of a signal. That's a little clue there. M-N-O-P, Q. I can't guess at the Q. That's an odd letter for me. R is kind of a vowel often. R, you can kind of see the R in the mouth. The center is just poking into the center. Kind kind of like, but it's not a clear one for me. Row, like if you start I can see the capital R, because like if you say road, you kind of do, or you kind of stick your lower out a little bit, so I can kind of see the letter in there, but it's not a clear one to me. Road, you can kind of see the whole profile in there, but I can't say that that's a clear one to me. S is a little bit like the tongue letter. I mean, it could just be because it sounds like a snake, hiss, that it's in serpent and snake. But I think it's also maybe because the tongue is snake shaped. And maybe use the tongue in almost all the letters, but maybe an S more than the others, since it sort of brushes up against the up of the mouth to modulate the sound. It's used in sign, sinuous. I mean, there's two uses for these letters. These letter shapes are used to show their, of course, what I'm describing to as talking cues to help you show how to hold your mouth. And so the letters are differentiating among themselves to be more apt for their particular articulation kind of signaling or their function. But they're also used pictographically themselves, like the way that O, the O is used in whole or zero or pool or loop or moon. It makes a lot of sense, but the S is the same in snake or serpent or sign. The cup in rut, or the U, the U in cup or rut. The V in valley. Which came first, I don't know always, but sometimes it's the fact that the letter reflects a tongue movement is paralleled by the fact that tongue movements that are given meaning in our words also, because words are often verbal gestures of some sort, like grasp or grab or catch, or say the word back, buzz up front, back. So the letters, our mouth is already and sort of an iconic field, with front and back, and if the motions of the articulatory organs that the letters represent already have metaphorical utility in our language. So even though our written language is called non-pictographic, it still ends up being more so than you might think. Just because of the fact that it is a pictographic representation of our speaking mouth. As simply as possible, as refined as possible, because the whole point was not to have too many symbols and not to be confusing that way, not to be too complex. But still, that meant that every letter had to evolve to be distinct from the other letters, and in so doing be apt for what it represents. The particular sound it represents, so it wouldn't be confusing. Like, I think some letters evolved out because they're like the letter theta, th, is a kind of a confusing one. It used to be called theta, And it used to be represented by basically an O with a line through the middle, something like that. Theta is what they call it. Now we call it TH, which is not really satisfying. It's not really a T and an H sound. But if you think about theta, it looks too much like a vowel, like some combination of an E and an O, the way that they used to have it. So I think that fell out of favor, because if you would have taken a word like the, like THE, the, if that was spelt with a theta and an E, it would be confusing. It just wouldn't work. So I think it's almost an aesthetic innovation to avoid confusion that they did it, but it's not quite satisfying. The TH and the PH, these I don't know what you call them, diphthongs, or these consonant combinations are a little awkward. They don't represent phonetically quite well. But the old theta sound actually had some pictography to it, because when you say the tongue crosses the hollow of the mouth to go between the teeth. The. So the old theta being, something like, I can't represent too well, but being something like that made sense. A line through the mouth like that had some pictographic cue to it that T and H don't. But pictographic systems aren't perfect, iconic diagram, but roughly and generally, it's still a very pictographic system. We just learn it so early, and it's not very complicated, so we don't we don't really even see the pictography in it. We don't need to. There's not that many forms, and we learn to actually identify the whole word and don't have to use them phonetically. But where it matters is in literacy, in teaching children, in children learning how to read over the hundreds of years. The more it made sense, the more apt the forms were, the more likely kids could pick it up and learn it. And so that's how it evolved. That was the natural selection force, just the same as our spoken language. The symbols aren't arbitrary in passing from generation to generation. The ones that don't make sense somehow get kind of unlearned and lost, or they don't get learned by the next generation. And so over generations, it evolves. It's always evolving and changing with words that make more sense. That's why I think of poetymology as a force of evolution. Right. A couple more letters. X is an interesting letter. Box. X is an S and a K at the same time, or the two ways of saying the letter C, the hard C and the soft C simultaneously. And so it's the back of the mouth letter and front at the same times. X, K and an S, how I think of it. Cross, as in cross. No X in that, but you can see that why the shape makes sense. It's a cross, because it's two letters on both sides of the mouth crossing and meeting in the center. X. Box works too, because that symbol of the X, you get the four corners of a square. So that kind of works there. But another letter is zigzag, Z of zigzag, it's a zigzag shape. It's reminiscent of the S, but it's when you say a Z sound, it's basically a vocalized S, vocalization. Put some voice into the S sound and you get a Z. So I think of it as sharpened S. Zigzag's a perfect word for it. Okay, that's the letters. When I first started trying to look at the letters for pictography, I started by drawing the profile of a head and trying to draw the letters where I could see them, where it made sense in the mouth. You know, like I could see the lip letters. I saw the B and the M and the W there. So I drew those up front in a profile. I'll put a couple of letterhead diagrams below. That's what I call them, letterhead diagrams. But it's highly subjective. I think everyone who would go through this would draw the letters differently because it's how you perceive them in your mouth as you're saying them. It's a kinesthesia, basically, a translation of movement, you know, gestural, like gestures, just like with body language, but of movement into a form, a diagrammatic form, or, you know, just where the stops are. Any part of making the letter that is, you know, diagrammable, that you can kind of see, that you're aware of more, like the way buh, you can see and you can feel the lips pressing together. So that's why that becomes the icon for buh sound, the B. So that's the pictographic alphabet. It maybe evolved, but either both consciously and unconsciously. You know, as the scribes were making up the alphabet or trying to encode speech, they probably were just taking hieroglyphs from existing forms. And so the etymologies will say that A looks like a ox's head, or B looks like a house, or something, or like the hieroglyph for house, or hieroglyph for ox's head, or something like that. But that's an etymology, but it doesn't really give you the sense of why the letters were chosen or evolved to the forms they were. For that, there was more of a aptness to them. It's the same way, that poetymology or onomatopoeia would evolve, and verbal gesture in general would evolve just by selective forces, which over the eons, children had to be able to learn and remember these things, and the forms that were most easy to teach and easy to learn were those that adapted and began to fit over long periods of time. So it is a natural selection process. Forms that were hard to remember dropped out, and we're left with the ones we have, and because they were the most apt, the ones that were easiest to learn.